He called us up and said, send me some paper, something to write with. Let me, put my thoughts down on paper. And so while he's in federal prison, sent on behest of Ronald Reagan, my father started outlining this book. And without that inspiration and that time for himself, that this book may not have been written at the time that he was. So, Ronald Reagan, my hat's off to you for inspiring my father.
Hey guys, it's Mandi with Global Hemp Association. I wanted to say thank you so much for joining. I'm excited about the opportunity to build a relationship and connect this supply chain. I mean, after all, that's why we started the association. Our association was built on the foundation of connecting supply chain, building relationships, and helping you grow your business. Anyone from farmers, manufacturers, and distributors, people that are passionate about the supply chain, and those creating products selling into biofuels, plastics, textiles, construction, and building materials. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for joining us. And thank you, everybody else, for logging in and following and joining today. I'm really excited about our guest today, Dan. I was connected to Dan through another member of ours, Bruce. So shout out to Bruce for making that connection. And since then, multiple people have said, hey, you really need to interview Dan. You really need to get with Dan. And so a small world, and here we are. Dan, you mind introducing yourself, telling everybody a little bit about yourself and how you got here? What's your background?
Well, I'm Dan Kerr, and my father was Jack Kerr. He was an activist. He became an activist in the late 60s, early 70s, about the time that I was 10 years old. And activism and cannabis, education has just been a part of growing up for me and my brothers and sisters in this family. And, today we still continue it through the Jack Kerr Foundation, through the continued publication of my father's book that he wrote in 1985, The Emperor Wears No Clothes. And now, dealing with, the transitions that we're all making in the cannabis and hemp space with regards to, understanding its full potential when used to its full utility. And, that goes from everything from industrial applications, plywood, hempcrete, plastics, to, what is most commonly known at the moment is recreational and medicinal access. And we try to, be involved and educate and be a part of, that commerce and the development of new, ways to engage an economy that, needs some help as we try to understand it, try to deal with regulations, try to deal with, building something that hopefully will be federally legal sometime in the near future.
I think it's definitely on the way. I don't think that we're very far off. It's not going to be much longer, and we'll see. What are okay, so before I dive into this, I have to give a shout out. Jonah, thanks for saying hello. It's good to see you. And Sean, of course, it's good to see you on again. I agree. Dan, from what I've heard and the book, Emperor Wears No Clothes, it's one of the best. It's got a lot of background to it. Can you tell us, for those maybe who have not read the book, what are some of the highlights or your favorite parts? And I know that it's probably changed because you've been able to really see all of the conversation come to light. All of the discussion you grew up with, now you're starting to see everybody else latch on and listen. Yeah,
well, the book, The Emperor Wears No Clothes, which looks like this. As I was growing up, it was teaching us the history of cannabis and how we've used it in the past and how important it was to the development of all nations globally, as we became able to economically, trade products and create industry and create wealth, create the protection of countries. All of these things are all also connected to cannabis and hemp. for without it, we wouldn't have been able to create armadas or fleets of ships that protected the barriers of countries, that gave us the ability to circumnavigate the globe and trade, because the first engines of economics that powered our ships were not diesel engines. They were hemp sails. So, the importance of this plant that created everything from, medicines to food to fiber that we wear, to, paintings that still exist in museums around the world is because these, and books and manuscripts and documents that, these were all printed and painted on hemp or canvas. And so this book, as I was growing up, was really eye-opening, to all the things that I had learned in school, and especially coming to understand all the things I didn't learn in school. And today, even though this book was written 35 years ago, today, as we are starting to embrace the opportunities to work with this plant once again, for the most part at this time without fear, not without complications, but, without the fear of thinking that we're going to go to jail for embracing the opportunities that this plant can provide. It's really exciting to see the new technologies that we're able to start working with, and the new ideas, and because all these advancements that are happening now are because we have technologies that allows us to take another step and another step and another step and another step into how we could use this plant to better ourselves, to better our use of resources on this planet, to potentially give us not just a way to survive in the future, but to thrive in it, and start using the natural cycle of opportunities on this planet instead of depleting non-renewable products that are creating everything that we're using today, and unfortunately including participating in this climate catastrophe that we are seeing more and more each day. But for many, it's still not something that is front and center. It's right now, it's still other people's problems and not our problem. And this plant and this book and the information in it continues to inspire people today, because we're able to actually take this plant and turn it into products that we use on a daily basis. And it's becoming more directly relevant to how we live. So if you're driving a Mercedes-Benz today, if you're driving a BMW today, you're driving a vehicle that's encapsulating you almost entirely with hemp-based products on the interiors of these cars. We have new plastics and new opportunities and new fabrics that are being utilized in the things that we touch every day that we don't even know. We don't even realize that this plant is part of our existence. Whether you fight against this plant or fight for this plant, it is part of our everyday space. It's part of who we are. Whether you're pro or con.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. Well, and it's always funny to me when people say, "Well, I'm not a cannabis user," but you use hemp chapstick and hemp lotion and hemp. Yeah, or any of these other things that you forget we are, or the conversation about cannabis compared to hemp, and that, utilizing the words marijuana and cannabis now all of a sudden demonize this plant with all of these other opportunities. And I know you've said in the past, I think I asked one time, what was your favorite part in this progression, right? Or in this, your experience growing up around cannabis. And you had mentioned that watching the progress and watching where it's come, right? Now moving forward, what are you looking forward to? And what is the part that excites you the most that hemp is involved in, or hemp touches, right? What part of all of this?
Well, one, hemp touches everything. It's the most disruptive technology that I've ever seen. And if you look at everything that it touches, from plastic to bioproducts to automobile products to foods to lotions to creams to shampoos to medicine to ingestibles and everything in between. The things that we use. We're talking today on our computers or our phones, and to think about the housings for our phones being able to be made from bio-renewable resources, like hemp, to be able to think that, the things that we touch and interact with every day can be a part of our existence without making it an issue, without making it political, without making it anything other than this is what's best for us. This is what's best for the planet. So the things that for me that are still exciting is that, this book was printed in 1985. And it started inspiring people at a time where people were activists. Now, here we are 35 years later, 37 years later, and we're no longer the activist my father was fighting for the rights. Now we are advocates fighting for the opportunities. We are looking to embrace this plant and do everything from lifting our communities to take care of our families, creating new products and new ways to not destroy the planet that we live on and hopefully love. And so for me, the most exciting thing is that this book in its limited release, it's probably been read, 20 million times. But there's billions and billions of people on this planet. So for me, the excitement is that this book is still relevant and still powerful and still inspiring, and that the education through this and what it brings. And, imagine if there was 100 million people that were enlightened because of this information, or 1 billion people that could embrace these real opportunities and the truth of cannabis. I think for me, the exciting thing is that the truth is out. It's there. We no longer have to be willfully ignorant. And that if truth is part of just our regular daily existence from the time that we're, students in school, as we grow up, how much further along could we be today? How much further along will we be tomorrow when we educate ourselves? And the excitement for me, if you think about all the products that are available to be made with this plant, imagine the amount of energy and embracing the opportunities to work with this plant because of the truth that this book provides. That instead of creating falsehoods and fears, and we start living based on fact instead of fiction, and we embrace this plant. I think it's the education that still is the most exciting thing for me, because there's so many people that could be educated, that should be educated, that will be educated. And through that, there's untold amount of new opportunities that will come because of that enlightenment.
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit about what the foundation is doing to help bridge this gap.
Well, we try to, take this information to anywhere and everywhere that'll listen to us, through events like NoCo Hemp, through, at the MJ BizCons, through, every place that is talking about education, and really breaking down the barriers and the falsehoods that created prohibition. And we already know that prohibition was a farce. Everything that we know today, everything that we've known for 50 years, said that, prohibition was really, whether it was racism or greed or ignorance, or a combination of all of those things. It was really to protect people, profits, and, investors. And to create products from, at the time, a cheaper, dirtier, polluting product that we didn't really, I don't think at the time that we really understood how detrimental embracing, petrochemicals would be to the existence of us on this planet, or with this planet with us on it. And I think now, we understand how damaging, by understanding technology, we understand how damaging how we've lived over the last 100 years of the Industrial Revolution, that, we at one time had a choice to embrace this plant. This book talks about the government in the early 1900s talking about no paper product should ever be made again from a tree. That hemp should be replacing that because it makes 4 times the amount of paper per acre than trees do. But that, when you're the most powerful people on earth, or the richest people on earth, or the most corrupt people on earth, or a combination thereof, you can create a new story. You can create a new narrative. And that narrative was, reefer madness and all of the craziness that created what prohibition was. And this book explains it. It talks about it. It lays out the story for you. And understanding this is so powerful, and at the same time it's so weighty, because the weight of information, the weight of truth, the weight that we carry, when you read this book, it's not like, oh, that was a good read. It pisses you off, because you're like, how could this have happened? How could we have been so gullible? How could we have been so careless? How could we have been so vile to one another? In order to protect profits or to protect, X, Y, or Z. How could we destroy ourselves for $1? Mm-hmm. And, this book upsets you. And once you carry the weight of truth, it's hard to put down, and it's hard to walk away from, even as it weighs on you and, pushes you back.
Look at what it's done for all of the people in the industry, right? I hear from people say all the time, people tell me all the time, man, everybody in the hemp industry is really passionate. And because as soon as you figure out what hemp, I guess, or what cannabis is capable of doing, it really is. It's that no-brainer. And I think that you said it well. The weight of the truth it's real. And it was my aha moment that what are we doing and why aren't we talking about this? And why aren't we sharing it? Right? It's pretty. Yeah.
And powerful. I can tell you that, being my father's son has its own weight unto itself. But the realization is whether I'm his son or my friend, or my father's friends, who came into his life or he came into theirs, the one thing they shared was an understanding of what history was and what opportunity for the future is. And, it's a shared experience. This thing that we're going through, that we're all trying to figure out, because at the same time that there's progressions in opportunity, as farmers start to farm hemp, there's still suppression on what we can farm and how we can farm and where we can farm. There's still use, fear and falsehoods to, in a sense, create control levers for how and where we can succeed. That's why we're so overly taxed and overburdened and overregulated in every single area, because they still use prohibition as the basis for the access that we have today. It's not truth. That is why we have access. The reason we have access today is not necessarily because of the truth of this book. The truth of this book was the inspiration for how loud the voices became to start demanding access. But the actual access that we enjoy today or struggle with today is still based in the same lies that created prohibition. It's still based in racism. It's still based in keeping us down. It's still based in fear. It's still based in, that's a dangerous thing, when it's never killed anybody who's consumed it. All of this fear is still used to put an idea in the community's mind that this needs to be regulated to such a point, because if people that are growing cannabis or hemp are allowed to work on their own as a tomato farmer or an apple orchard farmer or whomever, if they were allowed to their own devices, oh my God, they would make money and they would buy drugs and they would buy guns and there would be wars. And, there's just this absolute insanity that is still being connected and attributed to the embracing of this plant, whether it's hemp or whether it's cannabis. And hemp and cannabis is the same freaking plant. You look at them, whether one has more THC or less THC, but the reality is that everything that we're doing today is still governed by ignorance. It's still governed in the controls of greed and being able to minimize a market, to maximize the profit for the very, very few. Because nobody who's ever wealthy right now is at they're not looking to allow a farmer to gain the same power and prominence that they have. That how dare they take a seed and put it in the ground and grow wealth and grow health and grow security? How goddamn dare they? Yeah.
Yeah.
And the reality is the way that the business runs today is, it affects everything from building materials, automobiles, fuels, medicine,
and all
of these things. If these companies aren't controlling, and please forgive me, if these companies aren't controlling the future of what this plant provides within those sectors, they will never, 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 never allow a farmer to come up in stature. Farmer, get out there, dig your trenches, plant your seeds, harvest your crops, give it to us. We'll take it from here. Go do your thing, because you're not ever going to be on this side of the boardroom. You're never going to be in the C-suite.
So how do we bridge that? Like, I'm on your side. Yes, education, right? And speaking to those people. What is the message? I have so many questions as you've said stuff, and there's lots of questions coming in. So thank you guys. I want to give everybody that's listening a shout out, and please feel free to add comments down. I'll be sure to share all the comments that we don't get to with you, so that you can be sure to connect with everybody. But you said a couple of things, and when we speak truth and people say, well, why should I be listening? I'm still really taken back by how little people know, right? And you and I can talk. We know the cannabis plant. We understand its values, but I think sometimes we skip over a lot of those basic things as to why should people be listening and what should they be paying attention to. And you mentioned one earlier, the 4 times the paper pulp than wood per acre, right? And that it hasn't killed anybody. What are some other very aha moments that you have or you watch other people have when they figure out that hemp does this compared to plastics or construction or carbon footprint? We didn't even touch on the avoidance of carbon.
When you're talking about a natural cycle plant, instead of pumping out oil, from beneath the ground, you're talking about, as we're deforesting our rainforests around the globe, in order to produce, not ag land, but as we're taking plants off the planet to try to live off of something that's already lived and died and it's not coming back. We're putting ourselves at extraordinary risk for the future of this planet, and this planet's been around for a long time, and it might get to the point where we've just lost the ability to change what's already been started, and this planet at some point in the future, I believe, would probably heal itself if we weren't so busy trying to screw it up. But we know that there's an opportunity to grow this plant at scale, to replace the use of fossil fuels with a majority of the land mass that we have by planting hemp and using it for paints and varnishes and glues and sealants and clothing and all of these things that we use in our daily lives that don't poison the earth, that don't poison our skies, that don't poison our rivers and lakes and oceans. That we can create plastics that biodegrade in 30 days or 30 years or 300 years. And we can program that through the technologies that we have today and use it, with a biorenewable product, and by planting millions and millions and millions and millions of acres of hemp globally, we have the ability to create a way to clean the air, to clean our soils, to clean, I'm hearing now that, that we're getting microfibers in our fish, and we eat the fish and then we end up with microfibers within ourselves. All of these synthetic things, we wonder why we're so polluted as human beings, why we have so much more disease, why we have so much more cancers, because we're so horribly deficient in the things that God's given plants give to us, the ability to heal, the ability to live, the ability to create a better us with, whether it helps us to live longer, I couldn't tell you, I'm not that guy, but I can tell you that if we had better products in us, it would stand to reason that we would have a better life. And as long as we keep poisoning everything around us, that poison's going to end up in us.
We'd have so much less garbage. It's not just on our planet or on our earth, right, or in our backyards, but in us. There's just so much garbage. And it goes back to, plant-based medicines. And I see this on the rise, especially when you see places like Burger King or fast food joints talking about putting a veggie burger out, right? It's a shift in a consumer pull, right? The education, I think, is definitely starting to get there. So how far out do you think it is, before we really start to see mainstream products?
I'm not one of those super hopeful people that there's going to be an aha moment for the planet.
Look how long it took for your dad.
When my father wrote this book, he's like, here's the truth. Here's the truth. Here's the truth right here. And as soon as people know the truth, the war on drugs are going to be over. People are going to come out of prison. All of these things are going to change. The sun will come out. There'll be rainbows, and there'll be flying, unicorns, and and I'm exaggerating, obviously, but he figured that the truth was out. How far along would the end of this lie be? And here we are 35 years later, and we're still contesting with the same ignorance, and we're still dealing with the same lies, and we're still dealing with the same people who want to control what this natural plant does, and who gets to do it, And so I don't have a lot of hope, other than the fact that I think at some point some of these larger companies will start embracing this at some level of scale, and there will be some changes. But I don't think it's going to be fast enough. I don't think it's going to be large enough. I don't think it's going to be obviously fast enough to change the things that are happening to us right now today. These horrible floods, which have been going on, these horrible fires that seem to go on around the globe at this point because everything seems to be dry. There's the moisture in the air seems to be going away. And when there is moisture in the air, it's too much to even deal with. And, we're in a really bad spot. But I still have hope, that maybe we're wrong on this timeline as far as when things have to change, if you believe in a God, I can't imagine that a God would allow all of this information to be here and not be utilized to save us. I can't believe that, having the answer or an answer to our problems and potentially solutions for those will go unabated and be useless to the salvation of this planet and to mankind. I just can't understand that would be the future that we have.
Sure. So these are obviously subjects that come up all the time, right? As my goal is to help connect the supply chain and connect these dots so that we can move these forward and actually get products to mainstream, because what I see is people need to see it. I mean, I was at an event the other day and I was so taken back when somebody argued with me that I was talking about cannabis and not hemp. And because I said cannabis and not hemp, and that I was then talking about a different crop or a different product. And I was like, whoa, I'm not. And so it was very basic. And it really took me pulling out of my backpack a hemp plastic bottle or a hemp t-shirt or a hemp spoon or hemp straws to say, listen, it's not just an imagination. It's not just a vision anymore. It's happening, right? And so when we say time frame and is the time frame, what does that time frame look like? Reality is what is happening right now that people can be paying attention to. You've been out to some pretty awesome farms. You've got some deep roots in some existing companies that have both done well and seen all the struggles, right? And so tell me what
even the ones that are doing well are struggling.
Yeah.
Because we're all dealing with the same amount of BS. We're all dealing with the same restrictions. We're all dealing with the same regulations. We're all dealing with the same abilities to try to utilize this plant and to build something. And we keep having these roadblocks and barriers put up in our way, because I can tell you that the industrial side of the globe does not want this plant, even today, does not want this plant to take its place where it rightfully should be. And it is a struggle, and it is a war. It is a war on information, and it's a war on the truth. It's still, unfortunately, a war on humanity. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of work to do, I'm getting older. As we all are, I'm 59 this year. I'm not so sure that I'm going to see the end of this. But I'd like to think that through people embracing this truth and people embracing the information that's in this book, that these new individuals, these new people will find the same passion and intensity that my father found when he found the truth, and the things that I found once I allowed them to become part of my life, and the things that I see around the globe when I see people building homes that are more thermal efficient, when I see people building or making products like hemp plywoods and hemp insulations and hemp plastics and hemp energy storage devices, through the understanding of this plant, I have great hope that there are all these things that are changing. I mean, if you think that for 20 years, BMW, and for nearly 15, Mercedes have been embracing this plant for interior parts of their cars, but they never talk about it. They never talk about that these parts in their vehicles are made from this plant that the entire world at one point was absolutely 100% against because of the actions and the intimidation of the United States of America. It was through, the Single Convention Act. It was through the United Nations and all of this that, countries with the signing of a signature on a document erase their entire legacy that, the countries that had been producing hemp and hemp products for hundreds or thousands of years, this is illegal now. We are no longer doing it because now we're being subsidized by the United States of America, and we're abiding by their laws and regulations, and cannabis is now illegal around the world. This has to stop, and we need to re-embrace this in a way that we can really continue this work forward and allow companies to start using this and talking about it without reprisals from the consumers who don't understand that that this plant. I mean, if you think about when we were in school, when our parents were in school, we were being taught about canvas covered wagons came west and sails, ships sailing across the seas, and that all of these things were all due to cannabis, because canvas is cannabis. Canvas is a Dutch pronunciation of the Dutch or Greek word cannabis. So if it was a canvas covered wagon that came west, it was a cannabis covered wagon. It was cannabis oil that greased those wheels. It was cannabis oakum that sealed the hulls of the ship that allowed them to be watertight on our seas. It was our books, it was our Bibles, it was our paintings, it was our food, it was our medicine. And throughout the 1850s up into the early 1920s, cannabis-based medicine was 50 to 70% of all medicine had cannabis-based extracts in medicines that were sold around the United States and in many other countries. And these things were erased from our understanding. It was erased from our knowledge that this plant was important, even as an elixir, even as a treatment for corns for your feet, or many other different ailments. That this was part of our pharmacopoeia, and then all of a sudden it wasn't, because it couldn't be patented and it couldn't be controlled, and But if you think about all of the companies today that are pharmaceutical companies that existed in the 1800s and 1900s that still exist today, all of those same companies all used to make cannabis-based medicines, every one of them. But today they don't talk about that. Right. They talk about making something synthetic, and you see the stuff on television that says, "Hey, if you have acne, take this, but it could cause heart disease. You may die." Or if and it's like, "Oh, I can get rid of this pimple, but I might die." I'm going to get rid of this pimple with this shit that might kill me. And they put this stuff out on TV like it's okay. And imagine if you were able to have a cannabis commercial on television saying, "Hey, put this on your skin," and it's the potential for it to potentially be effective in the treatment of helping to control the damage and rays of the sun, or any other type of ailment from it's just it's comical when I see these commercials about how dangerous the drugs are, but how effective they could be. Mm-hmm. And the opposite is for cannabis. It's like all of these things are opportunities for cannabis to help cancer patients and AIDS patients and muscular dystrophy or muscular sclerosis, or everything from eczema to all of these other skin diseases. And you can put this thing on topically, or you can take it orally or suppositorily, and all of these things. And not one of them is going to say, "Put this on your arm, put this thing up your bum, put this thing down your throat, but you might die." But it can help, but it'll never happen with cannabis. Right. It's like, hey, just because this medicinal product could potentially make you feel actually good at the same time that you call it medicine, mm-hmm. doesn't make it dangerous. It just makes it a really great medicine.
Right. Right. Well, and we talk about medicine for our own personal health, right? But what it does on the big picture for the planet and our soil and our food production, we're not hardly talking about.
No.
And that's the part, we've got starving people in the United States, and our soils are eroding, and our floods and fires, like you said. Talk a little bit about that, or do you mind sharing a little bit about some of that? What do you see and what do you know related to?
I wish I knew more. I only know enough to sometimes make myself look foolish. But the reality is I know that if we embrace this plant to its full utility, that many of the things that we see today that are happening, from the poisoning of our air to the issues with global warming, the issues with pesticides and weedicides in our food, the antibiotics that we have stuffed into the foods that we eat every day, whether it's poultry or beef or fish or whatever. we're not doing ourselves any favors by filling these animals with, all of these things that we would then have to put into ourselves. If we're feeding them antibiotics, we're eating antibiotics. If we're feeding them, anything to make them grow, we're feeding us something that'll make us grow, because whatever goes in them goes in us. And from a global climate to floods and fires, all of these things can be helped, reduced, or even reversed if we could at scale embrace this plant. That I do know, because common sense and just, to what extent, I don't know. But we know that we can make changes. As we change things in our diets, we change things in ourselves. And if we do the same thing for our planet and how we live on it, those same things can come true for how we live on this planet, not just how I live individually. Education is still the most exciting thing. But it's also the most frustrating thing.
Oh gosh, you're telling me. Well, and I was just thinking, as you were talking, part of what my mission has been is to really help connect manufacturing to farming, right?
Yeah.
To really bring awareness back to where does our food come from. And it's humbling when I hear you say education is frustrating, because it is. And I think the conversation almost needs to switch to why should we, from why should we to why shouldn't we, right? Like you used as the example, why wouldn't you try it? It's not going to kill you. It's not going to hurt you. It may not make you feel the greatest. I mean, you may not like the way it makes you feel, but it's not going to hurt you, where these others have labels that could potentially kill you, right? And on our building and construction materials, I think that it's the same way, or our textiles or our clothing. It's this, is it going to cost? And I think that that's what we're up against in this industry, is this, right, the delivery of materials. We've got lots of comments on here for you. Dan, Tony says, Dan, thanks for joining us at our field day on Saturday. It was great to meet you. I'm so jealous. I wish that I would have gone down. And Drew said the same thing. It was great running into you on Saturday at the hemp jungle. I saw lots.
Yeah, it was a beautiful day out in the Central Valley here in California. It was, again, it's just another step in embracing this plant and looking at the opportunity to process it industrially. And there's a lot of work yet to be done to make, hemp plywoods at some level of competitive scale. And there's lots of infrastructure that's needed. There's lots of technology that still needs to be developed in order to make these products viable and usable and accepted. And that's a whole other thing, is yes, you can make products like flooring out of hemp. You can make home building materials, hempcrete and insulation and plywood. But the other side of it is getting it certified to be used in a home. And that's a whole nother issue. The fact that we can make it is great. But, if you think that the plywood industry is just going to roll over and go, hey, welcome, here's a new product, they're going to be like, yo, that product is never going to be used in my lifetime. As long as I'm cutting down trees and making, laminated plywood, hemp is never going to be a competitor of mine. And these are people that are protecting their turf. These are people that are protecting their shareholders. They're protecting their employees, instead of embracing a new technology and saying, hey, instead of cutting down trees, let's grow a bunch of hemp and make the same freaking product, But no, it's easier to keep using the tools that they've already created to deforest our planet and to create a warmer environment and increase the opportunities for catastrophes to happen, then embrace an opportunity to change that from ever happening again at the scale that is happening today. And we're so short-sighted, and we're so full of ourselves and so greedy as human beings that, we can't look out for our brother or our sister or our planet the way that we should, and the way that we could easily,
I agree.
But the will is not there at the moment.
It definitely is going to take the give, right? It's this give and take, and there has to be a lot of give, even in existing companies. If existing companies are trying to merge, like you said, or embrace this new opportunity or make change, it's going to have to take like you said, cutting profits for a little while to increase profits later on. This is where I think that this
and it's not even just increasing. I mean, imagine being able to increase a profit and increase oxygen in our air.
Yeah.
You know,
saving, yes, creating so many more.
I struggle with the insanity of the ideology of industry today. I understand it from a profit standpoint, but to what end? To the end of,
right. At whose expense? And this is where it becomes real, and what we're up against for time frame. You see Bruce. Hi, Bruce. It's good to hear from you. I'm glad to see you on here. Dan, can you please tell me the story on page 16 of Emperor Wears No Clothes? Why not use hemp to reverse the greenhouse effects and save the world? Where your dad USDA?
Well, the book that I have in front of me is the memorial edition of the Emperor, and I don't have the new edition in front of me, so I couldn't read you that off of the page at the moment. So sorry, Bruce.
But you do have. Tell me the story. Do you know the story? I think you've told me this before, where he proposed. Your dad, is this when he brought the boxes of research into the USDA?
Well, I mean, there was a point where my father was having a debate with the Department of Ag, in a sense, and the story, or the conversation between them was, if there was a plant that could replace and provide, a majority of the paper fiber fuel medicine on this planet, would that be something that that the U.S. Department of Ag would be in favor of? And he said, absolutely yes. If there was such a plant that could do all of these things, we would absolutely support it. And then my father says, well, there is a plant that can do this. And he's like, oh, well, what is it? And he says, it's cannabis, it's marijuana, it's pot, and the guy's response was, well, you can't do that. And my father said, even to save the world? And he says, it's illegal. He goes, even to save the world? You wouldn't save the world because this plant is illegal. And he goes, you can't do it because it's illegal. That's the mentality that we still have to get past. Is, how do we save ourselves when we're faced with such an overwhelming ignorance that is at the top of our government, whether it's at our city governments or our state governments or our federal government, the ignorance, the suppression of information, the subversion of the truth. How do we move forward when so many are against saving ourselves for $1? Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Okay, so we have an awesome LinkedIn guest who says there are some great manufacturing technology advancements happening in natural fiber. There's machinery now ready to build. Stay positive, Dan. You will see it. And I agree. I'll tell you, Dan, that my most favorite part about what I'm doing is the brilliant minds that I get to be around.
I love them. They inspire me. They keep me going, and I'm not down on it. I believe in all of this technology development. I see it all. I've seen technologies that are extraordinary. There's a CCR technology out of Colorado that created this biodegradable hemp cycling where you can program it, to break down in 30 days or 30 years or 300 years. That you can take, live feed product and create multiple different, value-added products that could create everything from, paper, toilet paper, printed paper to to things like, distilled spirits. I mean, all of these different things can come out of this one machine that gives the starting point to be able to make these products a reality. And those technologies exist. There are brilliant people that are working with battery storage technologies and new, battery applications using, the products and the byproducts of cannabis and all of these. And I honestly, these people, I'm not an engineer on any level, and it amazes me that they're able to think in three dimensions in a way that they can, like I can draw something and, I can build something. If I can see it in my head, I can build it. But these guys are thinking about something that's never existed and how to do something. And somehow they come up with, well, if we did this and we did this and we make this machine and it does this and extrudes that. And all of a sudden you have this byproduct that gives you the opportunity to make this. And out of that, you can make these 1,000 other things. These guys, these men and women that are really, pushing the envelope to the understanding of this plant and the opportunities that this technology can change is it's really exciting, and it's really humbling, that there are people that have dedicated themselves, to doing this. So, it's not all doom and gloom, but there is so much that needs to be done. And it can't just be done by us, these people in the space, the people that are fighting for the opportunity to work with and use and ingest and consume and wear and make these products every day. It has to be supported by consumers who don't really have the understanding of it, but want to embrace it. And the only way that they're ever going to be able to embrace it is if they understand it to some level, to where they can stand up in their communities and embrace the opportunities that bringing this plant into their farming community, bringing in this plant into their metropolitan areas, whether it's through, medicinal access, recreational access, farming, capabilities, that if people have the ability to embrace this plant, that aren't involved in producing the products from the plant, things could change a lot faster. If the community supported the true understanding of this plant, we would be remarkably better off and at a much faster pace than we are now. And right now, cannabis is moving at light speed. Anybody who's in the space realizes that every day there's something new. Every day that there's new opportunities. But yet we can't embrace them. We can't use them enough. We can't apply them the way that we would like to, because we're still being beat back by all of this suppression of how we can do it and where and when we can do it. And so there's this great fight on our hands with regards to, how do we succeed? How do we succeed now knowing the truth? But we can't do it on our own. It can't just be the cannabis community that does this. It has to be the global community that does this. And that's right now, that's where we're falling short. And that's where this book comes in. If this book can inspire people to embrace the people that are doing this and take the lies and the falsehoods out of out of the politician's mouth and out of politics, then we have great hope.
I want to highlight all those people that are doing it right? Because I'm with you that how do we connect them? I actually had an awesome conversation with a gentleman yesterday who has a number of patents and has done a ton of research on weight loss and skin concerns and all these different problems that cannabis is proving to help and aid, right?
Right.
And so I was talking to him and he said, it's amazing, and I hear this a lot, that those with the brains that have really done a lot of the research, nobody knows about them and knows who they are. So how do we bring them to light and connect them? And how do we get these tools and resources, and same with raw material or products, into the hands of our children, because they're really going to change the world and make the impact. They're who are willing to pay with their dollar, right? They're making an impact by saying, listen, I'm no longer going to pay for the polymers or the rayon or the oil-based products or plastic-based products, and I'm going to put my dollar where it counts. And so I'm with you. I would love to highlight them. I'd love to give a shout out right now to anybody that's on that is interested in speaking about what you guys are working on, because this is exactly how I see us bridging the gap. It's this education tool that creates the conversation and then puts the product in their hands. So I'd love to do that. Hemp trivia question, Bruce. What critical resource was the War of 1812 fought for?
Wow, that's a tough one, Bruce.
Do you know it?
It's cannabis.
Okay, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about that.
Let's see if I can pull it up quickly enough here.
Okay. This is great. Kathy, agricultural classes, chemistry classes, biology classes, environmental classes. I assume that's getting everybody. I'm assuming you made a comment just before and I didn't see it. But yes, getting our products into all of those classes, connecting. I'm with you. It doesn't necessarily need to be a hemp curriculum, but in biology and chemistry and all of those others. Oh, look at you. 1812, the War of Hemp.
So there you go.
You have guests. That's what happens when we're out. The emperor wears hemp Levi's. That's what we need. Sean, thank you very much. I really appreciate your following us, and I agree with you. Definitely highlighting people, just like Dan. Thanks again for that question. Hemp sails and ropes, he was saying also, right?
Well, everything. If you were Napoleon, if you were the English, if you were the Spanish, and you had an armada that protected your country, your shorelines, or if you wanted to invade another country to expand your footprint and your power, you needed hemp. You needed it for your sails, your ropes, your riggings. You needed it for the materials for your soldiers' uniforms. You needed it for everything, including the sealant for your ships. It was the most important plant, the most necessary plant, and it was that important. And if you wanted to expand the power of your country, then cannabis hemp was the answer. And that was true for Napoleon as much as it was true for the United States in World War II. In World War II, it was the first time, since Prohibition, and in fact, even since before Prohibition, that the U.S. government legalized hemp once again and encouraged farmers to grow hemp. And they put out this documentary called Hemp for Victory. And, they encouraged all farmers and 4-H clubs and that to grow cannabis for the war effort. And they made everything from, the ropes and riggings for our ships to the riggings for our parachutes, the belts and other materials for our soldiers to carry everything from their water to their bullets, and they literally made this 14-minute video, which you can go onto YouTube and watch for free. And for the first time, they almost talk about the real truth and history of cannabis, with the exception of throwing in a dash of fear, because, they had to. And they literally said, hemp for this, hemp for that, hemp for victory. And, said that they wouldn't be able to win the war and free the world unless we grew hemp, which is an extraordinary, statement for the U.S. government to make in 1942. And they did it. We grew hemp here, we made products here, and we won the war. Was it the reason we won the war? I don't know. But the fact is that this country, when necessary, when it came right down to it, we embraced what was necessary. And this plant is necessary and has been since we've discovered it and all of the opportunities that come from it. And
nearly every president George Washington and Thomas Jefferson both, made very bold statements about growing health, growing for the wealth of our country.
Jefferson didn't just make statements. Jefferson was a cannabis smuggler. He went to Europe to smuggle seeds from China and around Europe into the United States when he was an American envoy or a colony envoy to the United States, or when he went over to England, he went over there basically as a spy and smuggled seeds back into this country to create our own independence. These are very, very powerful things that aren't part of our normal, hey, learn this in U.S. History 101, and it's incredibly, powerful when we look back at the writings of our forefathers. Mm-hmm. And it's important that we reintroduce this history. It's important that we embrace the understanding of just how important this plant was. I mean, we could pay our taxes with cannabis for almost 200 years. Mm-hmm. And now we go to jail for it. Mm-hmm. The turn of the turning of the tide for what this country embraced, and now what it pushes back against, and it's not because the country doesn't understand how valuable this plant was. In 1942, they understood exactly how valuable this plant was, but even then, when we were stressed to the point of not having the products that we needed in order to engage in the war, they knew that they could depend on this plant. But as soon as the war was over, they were just as quick to dam it again. And imagine where we would be as a country, as a planet, had we not taken the road of petrochemicals, had we not taken the road of synthetics, had we not taken the ideas that using trees for everything from paper, for paper, and use this plant instead, how much further along would we be, technologically speaking? How much better would our cars be? How much more biodegradable would they be? How much better would our fuels be? How much better would our air and our water? How much better, instead of 100 years of depleting our global resources in something that is poisonous and non-renewable? How much better would we be if we were embracing this plant? How much more of our rainforest would still exist? How much better our lungs would be? How much less struggle and cancer?
It can't be too late. I can't hear that it's too late.
But it's not too late, because we still have the ability to embrace this. But how much longer will it take now to fix it?
Okay, so there's a couple of comments that real fast, we're at an hour, so I want to respect your time and call it. But there's a quick question. Can hemp address world hunger?
Absolutely. The hemp seed is one of the most nutritional, if not the most nutritional, single seed on the planet. Has high levels of linolenic and linoleic acids. It has a great source of protein. You could eat the hemp seed alone and have the ability to sustain yourself without dying, and being able to create protein, be able to create the products. Linolenic and linoleic acids these are essential fatty acids that our bodies don't make. It has to come from our food sources. And inside the hemp seed are those. And if we're able to consume them, then we have the ability to have the building blocks that our bodies need in order to survive and thrive.
See, okay. And then one last funny story with your dad, Ronald Reagan, and the Canadian flag.
Oh my God. So, in 1979, 1980, we were protesting at the Los Angeles Federal Building, right off the 405 freeway at Wilshire Boulevard and Veteran Boulevard, right there in Westwood, California. And in the November election, in 1980, Ronald Reagan was elected president, and he lived just the other side of UCLA in Bel Air, and he was on his way to his pre-inaugural haircut. We were told, and his motorcade came down Veteran, passing all of us protesters on the lawn. And at this time, we were on the lawn, I think, for about 80 days already. We had live bands. We were feeding people. There were people sleeping on the grounds. And he pulled up to the federal building. And when he was greeted by the security there, it was like, "Hello, Mr. President. Welcome." And he's like, "So, why are the Canadians so upset with us that they would be protesting out there on the lawn?" And the security said, "Well, Mr. President, those aren't Canadians; those are marijuana protesters," because he had mistaken the cannabis leaf for the maple leaf. And he says, "Well, can't we do anything about that?" And he said, "No. Well, we took them to court, and they have the right to be there." And Ronald Reagan was overheard to have said, "Well, I'm going to be sworn in the next couple of weeks. Let me see what I can do." And it was shortly after his inauguration that my father and a few other protesters, we were registering voters to vote and doing all of these things. My father and a few other protesters were arrested on federal grounds. And the officers came up and said, "You all are under arrest." And my father said, "Why?" And the officer said, "You're in violation of the Sedition Act." And my father, being ex-military MP, understood what the Sedition Act was. And my father said, "But the Sedition Act, that's only in times of war." And, my father says, "We're not at war with anybody. This was 1980. And the officer poked my father in the chest and goes, "We're at war with you," And my father was arrested. They were fined $5. Admit guilt, pay $5, go on your way. My father refused to pay the $5. He said, "I'm an American. This was my right. I refused to pay the $5 fine." He was still found guilty of sedition. And that led to multiple, appeals to higher courts. Finally got to the state Supreme Court, and again was found guilty of sedition. And he was sentenced to federal prison for registering voters to vote on federal grounds after dark. And that was the charge.
What?
And but here's the bright, shiny thing out of that whole story is that while my father was in federal prison, he didn't have anything to do. And he was bored. It was the first time in 15 years that he wasn't, managing a petition campaign. He wasn't registering voters. He wasn't he wasn't trying to legalize cannabis. He was sitting in a cell with nothing to do. So he said, "Hey, he called us up and said, send me some paper, something to write with. Let me, put my thoughts down on paper." And so while he's in federal prison, sent on behest of Ronald Reagan, my father started outlining this book. And without that inspiration and that time for himself, that this book may not have been written at the time that he was. So, Ronald Reagan, my hat's off to you for inspiring my father to kick the shit out of the war on drugs and the war on people. So, there are cause and effects for everything that we do in life. And I think that is, I think that's one of them. And I think that it's one of the things that makes this book even more important and even more special, because it came out of the very worst of humanity and inspired the very best of it. And it's one of the things that I'm proud to continue to print every single day to talk about its contents as much as I can, and to encourage people anywhere and everywhere to get your copy of this book through Amazon, the 14th edition, either in digital download, which is interactive, which is very, very cool. You're able to look at the book on your device or your laptop or your computer, and as you're looking at it, you can click into the hyperlinks, and those hyperlinks will take you into videos and testimonials, and you'll be able, instead of just reading about history, you can click on that hyperlink and it actually takes you into the future, and it's really extraordinary. And then you could always get the print to own version of this book, and they're extraordinarily valuable and affordable, and always something that you can look to for inspiration and understanding of the things that we're talking about today and the things that we'll be embracing and using tomorrow.
Awesome. Well, thank you very, very much, Dan. I'm excited to have you back. Let's do this again. There's a lot of comments that came in that I didn't get to, so thank you, everybody that was joining, and I'll send them over to you, Dan, later on.
Thank you so much.
If anybody else needs anything, don't hesitate to reach out. I can definitely help make connections for you. I'd love to have you join us. We have a meeting actually at 1:00. So in 2 hours, where we'll be talking about carbon and carbon sequestration sustainability with two incredible speakers. So for those of you that are interested in joining, our link is on our website under events, carbon sequestration. And other than that, Dan, do you have anything else you want to leave for everybody while we sign off?
No. Just, thank you all for tuning in and listening. I hope you found some useful information. And if you haven't gotten the book, it's something to not just read for yourself, but share with your friends, share with your kids, share with your parents, share with strangers. The information that's in it will continue to help change how we live on this planet, and that's the most important thing. So look for the 14th edition through Amazon. It's available for Kindle. Anything that's not the 14th edition is an older print that's probably far more expensive. That doesn't have more information. Those would have less information. And make sure you get to the 14th edition and enjoy the read. May it inspire you.
Awesome. I did share a link to it. I don't know if the one that I shared is the most recent. It doesn't look like it is, because this one looks like it's paperback November 2020. Nope, 2010. So I'll reshare another link on here with the most recent, because I just looked it up. I actually ordered a copy a while back, so thank you very much. Yeah.
So you'll need to go to the 14th edition, and we'll get to the right one.
Cool. Well, it was a good start. Other than that, thank you, Dan, very much.
Thank you all.
Everybody love later. We're signing off. Have a good day.
If you like our content and like what we're producing, please like, share, comment, subscribe. You'll meet so many amazing people with all of the interviews that we've done. They're available on our YouTube channel and on Patreon.